Welcome back to another episode of the Working Title Podcast, the only podcast where we still don't have a title after, 2-3 months. Not that high on my priority list. Anyways, today's debate, is it wrong to be strong? And by that I mean, Sede of Catholicism. Today we got, the one and only freshman papist. I'm pretty sure.
That's right. Freshman papers is here, ready to debate.
Ready to debate and talk about it. And in these seconds, we also got the boy Murka.
I am here to advocate against the papacy, as you could say.
Very epic. Okay.
Small set of mechanism, right? Let's go right here, run up, Pablo. Come on. I'm sorry.
Hey, what?
Upon interruption, I'm gonna have to move. Just to be just be clear, we're arguing says mechanism, right? Sorry. I'm sorry about that with the. Okay, so we're discussing mechanism, right? It's the topic.
Yes, 2 minutes in and it's already gone to shit.
Bruh.
Alright, so...
Alright, well, let's start with the first question.
Alright, first things first, just for the uninformed. What precisely is Sadovacantism?
I would define Sadovacantism as the formal rejection that the modern papacy, that is that is post 1958, after Pope Pius XII, I would that Sadovacantists say that they are not valid popes.
I've heard before that it's just about how the current pope is invalid, like it's decided on a case-by-case basis.
Sedevacant. I'm a former Sedevacantist, so there's of course there are some different opinions on it. But a lot of people say the cutoff date begins at 1958. Basically, they say that every pope before 1958 was valid, but then since 1958 there has been no valid pope because of the Sentence of Vatican II. And they say that, and they I would erroneously say that because of that was perceived to be heresy, that's an obstacle to all occurring in the Chair of Peter.
Alright, that kind of gets into my next little question here. What's like kind of the theological basis for Sadovacantism?
I would say that the theological basis is really so a lot of these Sadovacantists, members of the Society of Pius X, who have indeed basically they took it to its logical conclusion. Basically, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre said, basically was what we call like a crypto Sede, right? In the fact that he didn't believe that there was no pope per se, but in function, he believed that he didn't basically accept the pope's authority. And from that's where a lot of Sedevacantist leaders come from. Is in fact followers of Archbishop Marcelo, who basically took it to its logical conclusion, because this VX territory is very untenable. And so basically all they took it was to its logical conclusion, and that's how and that's basically where we're at today. And I think that's really a theological basis is in rejection. The rejection of Vatican II is very key to acceptance.
Okay, I'm gonna keep real the audio quality. I mean, I'm doing my best over here. It's kind of trash, but basically what you're saying, theological basis is rooted in the rejection of the Vatican II Council, and basically taking the adoption of the past few popes, or the past few popes' adoption of the Vatican II Council, like that adoption meaning that they are illegitimate popes, and that's like kind of theological basis.
Yeah, well, that would be the Seven Contests. But really, if you look at leaders of the Seven Contest movement, for example, like Bishop Sanborn of Most Holy Trinity Seminary, and his lineage, or his apostolic lineage, they're all former SSPX guys, right? They all went to a cone. They all knew Marcus Lefebvre, and basically they just took his position to a logical conclusion. In the sense that they basically right they they believe that the Pope is valid, but they basically like disobey him. So in function, they don't really believe he's actually power over them, and that's characteristic of most schismatics, which of the SPX is. There's a lot of comical debate whether the SPX are in schism or not. But it's just But even if they aren't schismatics, they do entertain a lot of schismatic attitudes.
Yeah, so what you're trying to say here is that there are a couple different like main lines of thought. One that's like the more schismatic one is the outright rejection of like say, Pope Francis's occupation of the see, like he's 100% illegitimate and therefore the seat is vacant. That would be like the more schismatic approach. Whereas the other no, would you care to elaborate?
No, it is. I mean, like that is schismatic to recognize.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
sorry.
Because schism.
Actually, no. You go.
Because schism in turn leads to more schism. So,
right. And the other line of thought that you're talking about was just like the line of Sede Constitutes, where it's like, you know, the Pope is legitimate, but because he adopts what he believed to be sort of a heresy in the form of the Vatican II Council, and its conclusion that, you know, the Pope is still the Pope, but he doesn't have that much authority. Is that anywhere?
No. So the first one was correct. The second one, the latter, was not, because that is a position of the SSPX, who are not officially Sedevacantists. Now, there are different forms of Sedevacantism, right? So there's the outright rejection of everything after 1958. There's also a set of probationists who say that, for example, Most Holy Trinity Seminary, run by Bishop Sanborn, are set of probationists, which is one of Sedevacantism, in which they believe that there is a mature. Basically, they recognize that Vatican I is very clear in the fact that the chair period will have successors into perpetuity, and so how they resolve that for themselves is they say, look, there is these popes are material popes, and the fact that there is human power to there's a human power to elect, right? But they're only there for figureheads. They don't actually have any power, and but the main argument is that they lack the formal aspect of the papacy, which is the function to rule. They don't believe that modern pope. They don't believe that popes since Pius XII have that power to rule the church because of their alleged adoption of heresy.
So basically, like what you're saying is like what you just detailed, kind of the belief that the Pope is kind of just like a parliamentary monarch, just like a figurehead, like not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, Merker, do you have anything to conflict that or anything at all?
So I'm just wondering, do you think there is anything the Pope could do that would invalidate him?
Probably straight up
mysticism. Yes, there is. No, actually, there is some theological debate on this. So, I read some stuff from Father Gregory Hesse, who is an Austrian canon lawyer, and he says, well, of course there is an element to it, right? In that formal heresy, right? So we have to make the distinction between material and formal heresy, right? So formal heresy would be, I know this is the church's teaching. I reject it anyways. Okay, and I know that this is what the church teaches, but I choose to reject it. Right? That is formal heresy, and that automatically excommunicates you, or as we say in Latin, lite sententia excommunicatio. Right? Right. So formal heresy automatically separates you from the church. Because and as characteristics, for example, we see of classic heretics like Martin Luther or John Calvin, right, who said, right, I know this is the church's teaching, but I will deny it anyway, right? So formal heresy is very different than material heresy, right? And material heresy is what we see in popes since Vatican II, right? I don't think there's really any debate that these popes have been materially heretical, right? But material heresy does not excommunicate it, because if you read the documents, they don't intend to be heretical, right? In order to separate yourself from the chair of Peter, you have to be formally formally in contempt of the papacy and the doctrine of the church, and that you know in that you know the doctrine of the church, and you say, no, these are wrong, here's my new religion, right? But in material heresy, it's like they have no intention of being heretical, and they really think that this is in line with tradition.
So what you're saying is that the difference with the the Diamond Brothers would definitely say that the material heresy is worthy of excommunication, but you're arguing that the fine line of excommunication that makes these popes still valid is that they are more of like an oopsie poopsie kind of heretic rather than a no screw, this is I'm right heresy.
Exactly. Yeah, so the Diamond Brothers, what they erroneously presume, what they erroneously push, is that they say there is no distinction between material and formal heresy, right? And this is why you trust canon law, because every canon lawyer you talk to will say, no, there is a distinction, right? But the Diamond Brothers say, no, there isn't. But guess what? They aren't canon lawyers, and they aren't even real monks, right? I've done the entire dive down into Vatican Catholic, right? I watched all the videos on it, and I was very depressed for a long time until I listened to actual experts who said, no, there is a material and formal aspect to the heresy, and it's what all of them reject. It just they erroneously quote Bellarmine too, but even if Bellarmine did say that, the majority of canon lawyers say no. Right, and this from historical perspective in Catholicism, we go by consensus, because we understand not all doctors of the church are going to be exact, or fathers of the church are going to say the same thing. So that's why we go by consensus, and the consensus of canon lawyers and theologians unequivocally is on the side of the material and formal distinction. So the Diamond Brothers basically they don't really know what they're talking about, and they mislead souls. That's why you should watch them, because they lie in order to preserve their argument. Right.
Mark, do you have any response to that, or any questions?
I'm kind of just listening right now. I don't really have too much input on this.
Alright, cool. That takes us to our next question. I'm pretty sure we've already touched on this, but how does actually, yeah, you already just on it, but explicitly stating, how does Sede Catholicism hold up as an ideology?
Actually, listening to testimony from a lot of the ex-Sede vacantes, it shows that for a long period of time it's very, very untenable, because it's Herculean demands, right? So basically, what I mean, except for basically most of the vacantists advocate that there are only 15 real priests or 20 real priests in the world, right? Or a few hundred priests in the world, the sacraments, like a quote unquote real church, is in the middle of like nowhere, and like in the mountains of Idaho, right? And it's like really like Herculean demands, and it isn't very tenable as an ideology. I don't think. It's just going back to what I first said about the former Sedes, is the fact that former Sedes, they say that's like very like unsustainable, and the fact that, right, you need to have like perfect contrition, which is like kind of impossible to do on your own, right? So in fact, that basically they say that like there's barely like any sacraments left, right? And so it's really unsustainable for like a long period of time, unless you have the financial means necessary to move like close to one of these chapels. But like other than that, it's really just untenable in the fact that the majority of Catholic thought is against you, right? And the Catholic system cannot work without a formal head without a formal head like at the head of the church. It just doesn't happen. And the consensus of most theologians and canon lawyers are against you on this. And really, it's false, and it's not very untenable for a Catholic, because there is no historical precedent, because there's no like historical precedent for it, and B, you have no backing, and you basically have rejected the very idea of what it means to be Catholic, which is being a part of the church. Of course, they would then counter that with saying that isn't the church, but the thing is, they have no authority, and Christ established an authoritative church. So how can we have an authoritative church, which is one of its marks, if there is no authoritative or visible head of the church? Yeah.
I believe it could be tenable because the Pope is all the way at the top of the church, while the average Christian, they go to church at a local level and interact more with the bishops and those guys. So they could still go to church and still believe that the Pope isn't valid.
But the thing is, like, these chapels are like really rare. There are like 70 in the world. There isn't a lot of those, right? And the very idea of being Catholic is being in the church, right? It's conducting, and one of the modern churches, one holy Catholic and apostolic, in a sense that there is no oneness to Catholicism. There's so many different like schools of thought and interpretations of Catholicism that there really like is no unity, right? So there is no mark of it. So they basically in fact like reject the mark of unity, right? Because there is no oneness, right? And that causes like deep inner turmoil, right? In the fact that just goes against the Catholic faith. I mean, like, sure, what we're arguing is that they just don't want to think about it that much, but like it's they interact with bishop. However, according to Vatican I, like, bishops get their authority from the Pope, right? So if there's no real Pope, then the bishops don't really have any authority, anyways. So it just and from that there goes in a lot of other questions, right? You know, like, are these sedevacantist priests even valid, right? So it's like an endless loophole of digging, right? But other than that, because what God's priests bring, like, because like what God's promise bring is Pope, right? There's always a mark for Pope in God's promise, right? And in sedevacantist, there is no Pope until the second coming, right? It's like, you know, like leads way into the coming, right? But like if it leads to despair, then it's like not of God, according to St. Francis, because according to St. Ignatius of Loyola, right? It's if it's desolation, it usually doesn't come from God. So it's just I don't believe it's untenable because it violates like the core of what it calls.
Does that mean sedevacantists tend to believe that there won't be a valid Pope until the second coming? Because you'd think that if the Pope aligned more with their theological beliefs, that they would accept him as a valid Pope, right?
It's just again, there's a lot of like schools of thought on that, right? So with one side, like the Diamond Brothers, they just say we just wait until second coming. On the other hand, there's some who embrace, the Catholic like this like basic alleged prophecy of kind of fantastical, that like the mother of God will come down and she'll like pick a cardinal and he'll send to the papacy and everything will be fine, right? So there's different like thoughts on that. And what you said about aligning to their principles. I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, that's what they could say, but like they're isn't like. I don't think it's going to happen, right? That's a very kind of what, but that like could be a problem because what a lot of Seventh-Adventists argue is that there is a permanent doctrinal like separation, right? And the fact that like since now, great. So this is another one Seventh-Adventist argument is that modern rites of ordination are invalid, right? So if there is no valid priests and no valid bishops anymore, then there can be no valid pope, right? And because that's also a core element of Seventh-Adventism is that they reject anything and everything of the new sacraments, right? So they believe that all ordinations are like made after like 1960, made after 1968 are invalid, right? And then over time that would defeat the purpose of there would be no valid pope because there would be no valid priests or bishops to ordain someone who is truly a priest or bishop. Because validity is something that takes place.
Just to piggyback off that, and also kind of your earlier point about like kind of how much of a Herculean effort being like a proper state of Countess is, going to these chapels in like the middle of nowhere. It's not entirely true that, like, at least from research, that State of Countess believe that there are absolutely no priests left or no legitimate bishops left. I'm sure that's definitely a sect, but I've also seen a few State of Countess talk about like these like bishops and priests ordained by these like two random bishops in like Mexico and Thailand.
Yeah. It's like, and they're like really sketchy too. Like they're ordained in like the middle of nowhere, in, like some garage, right?
Yeah, and even garage in Bangkok.
yeah, exactly. And like those even are like there's validity too because the Archbishop Troop, who ordained a lot of Seventh-Adventists, right? There are actually kind of legitimate arguments that said like he wasn't like fully conscious of when he's doing these because he kind of had like some mental problems, Archbishop Troop. So there was even debate whether those are valid, right? But even right, for example, like even if those Seventh-Adventist priests and bishops were valid, right? They aren't making it into the formal like I don't think they're being ordained a cardinal, anyways, right? That it didn't happen. And again, here we are, right, with different interpretations of canons, right? So you have Michael Diamond, who says literally there are like no more priests left except ones from like 1968. But then you have others who are like, no, there is. But the thing is, like, in kind of Calorie, they can't restore papacy. I don't think they're gonna get into the Club of Cardinals. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I kind of want to move this along to shit. We're already at like 25 minutes here, and I think Merc has to go relatively soon. So I just want to speed this along just a little bit more. So basically, like, what kind of legitimacy is there behind the like principles or ideals of State of Countessism, or its criticisms of like the Catholic Church and a formal Catholic Church and its leadership? Like, basically, are State of Countess cooking on?
Yeah, I mean, they're cooking on the fact that like there is heresy, right? A lot of it. Right? That's kind of fortunate, yeah. And they call it out, and they do a good job, right? They're also good at what I like to know. I listen to Sony Inc, because I know that they're, for the most part, going to be doctrinally orthodox, right? So they're good with doctrinal orthodoxy, except on matters of physiology, which is about church governance affairs. But basically, other than that, they.
The college kind of like took a nosedive. Can you go back to like Sede-Catholicism and orthodoxy?
Oh yeah. So most of their sermons are right. So like almost all of their sermons, like 90% of them, are like doctrinally orthodox, right? In a sense, like they present the truths of the faith as they always have been and always will be. And because sometimes heretics preach bad methods, right? So that's not all good. They're also good at exploiting heresy, and they're really good at promoting like a traditional Catholic lifestyle, right? But orthodoxy in the sense that like they hold true to the Catholic faith and just not nice. But other than that, they aren't really doing much else.
Okay, so I know I'm supposed to be advocating for Sede-Vacantism here, but I mean, how do these guys even still say that they're Catholic? It just doesn't seem like they're very Catholic at all.
Exactly. Well, they're schismatics, right? So I don't really think they're really Catholic, right? Right, in the sense that they have valid sacraments, right? But they're illicit. Right, so there's a distinction between validity and validity and invalidity, and if it's okay, with illicit and illicit, right? So illicit means good, you should. Illicit means you shouldn't, right? Valid means that it takes place, right? If sacrament is valid, it takes place, right? If I pour baptism and use a form of baptism takes place. Right. If I don't, right, an invalid means it does not take place. Right. So if I do not use water or I don't use the Trinitarian formula, there is no baptism. Right. So their sacraments are valid, but they're illicit to go to.
Wait, speaking of like valid sacraments, I just want to ask you something personally because it just popped up in my head. How valid are the sacraments of baptism that happened over the COVID lockdowns, like specifically, those ones with, the famous memes of the priest, using fucking like super soakers to conduct the sacrament of baptism.
Yeah, I've seen this too. For baptism, right? It really requires each sacrament, right? So each sacrament, there are elements of validity in it, right, that are explicitly outlined by the church, right? There are some doctrines that say, like, here is the form of baptism, right? And if you follow that form of baptism, the sacrament takes place. So,
right. So my question was: does the super soaker does the use of a super soaker maintain the formula of the sacrament of baptism? That's my question.
As long as it's done with the Trinitarian formula, yes, because water is.
Alright, cool. So, alright, let's get on to the next question. Now, you mentioned that you were a former Sede yourself. What was like? I mean, we've talked about this personally, but just for the camera, like, what was like your personal experience being a Sede?
So I was a Sede last year during. It was some of the most. It was the most depressed I've ever been in my entire life, to be very honest. Because I genuinely believed there was no sacraments, there was no pope, there was no nothing, right? And for me, the church is the most necessary, right? And the church is the most necessary thing in the world, because without the church, we're kind of done, right? It's over, right? So if the church is no longer valid, then like we're screwed. So it was really, really despairing, and I just really got discouraged. And I was so sad. I was in so much like spiritual just like agony. It was terrible, right? And that's what a lot of Saturdays go to on a day-to-day basis. And I couldn't imagine being a Sede-Vacanist for like 20 years, like some people have. I mean, I have no idea like how you do that. But like what really like made the difference for me is listening because the past year a lot of more literature has been written on Sedevacantism, it's like Jesus emergence, and it just I actually did a place for it on YouTube. It's called Ending Sedevacantism for Hardcore. But basically, I was listening to a lot of testimonies of like ex-Sedevacantists. Also, I was listening to like a lot of like actual like canon lawyers and stuff, like know what they're talking about, right? And basically, over time, with listening and reading them, I've gradually understand what church teaches, and I figured out myself that Sedevacantism is wrong because I find out what the church actually teaches and how they misinterpret that and make it powerful. So it just really was over time for me. Like over time, stuff getting defined, like, just saying just like what the church will teach. So
yeah, I mean, I myself, I can definitely corroborate that it was mad depressing. Like, that whole rabbit hole that you went down. Like, if Pope not real, then all bishop not real, then no priest real, then no sacrament real. And it's just like, no, we're all going to hell. And,
basically, like unless you have like perfect contrition, which is really, really, really rare.
I mean, you basically got to be like, you basically got to be Mary herself. Like,
basically, yes, basically. Yeah. So it was the most impressive for very much. In my short, I don't know, is the most impressive I've ever been. And now I'll never do it again.
Yeah. And Murky, you said your original purpose was to like defend Sedevacantism. What's like in your experience kind of like learning about it?
Well, just the way I've heard about it, it really doesn't seem Catholic at all, because the believers in it, they try to remain Catholic in their faith, except for the, Sedevacantism. So
you see, they're all about everything else besides the reality.
Right. You were talking about how how you were getting really depressed over it, and I mean that makes sense, because how can you be a Catholic and believe in it? It just seems like a different denomination, honestly.
Yeah,
it's literally just like Catholic masochism. You know what I
mean? Yeah, I would say that they're Protestant in their theology.
Yeah, right? That's what I was about to say, because like when you talked about how like, if no Pope real, then and there are like very few like real priests according to Sedevacantists, then that just means like the Sedevacantists, like the valid churches within Sede, or that Sedes believe are valid. It's very like Protestant in its nature. Like I've been watching some of my Redeemed Zoomer lately, and like the Protestants, they do their whole thing where like, oh no, institution corrupt, you gotta run away, yeet. And
that's like let's start a new church.
Yeah, let's start a new church, and that's like. It's the whole Sedevacantist thing, like rejecting the main Catholic Church and declaring these like, random churches in like the most random places.
And like
it's a very Protestant thing to do.
No, and also if we look at all these Sedevacantist groups, like they like all like excommunicated each other. So they've already betrayed the mark of unity of the church, right? So they can't really. So like just speaking like a bare like march of the church, like a very like understanding of like what the church is. It isn't one, so it can't be the real church because it's not one.
Yeah.
So going back a bit to the talk on sacraments, if someone received the sacrament of baptism from a Sedevacantist priest, would you believe it's valid?
Well, I would. It is valid. Cause, like. They are, valid, at the end of the day, like you did agree that Sede like bishops and priests, they're all still like valid bishops and priests. They're kind of like Protestant, kind of wacky about their thoughts on like the actual main Catholic Church.
Yeah, so we would say that Protestants don't have valid orders, right? Right, the Orthodox do, right? Because they maintain some segment of one place. So we would say that Sedevacantism, right? So Sedevacantism baptism, I would say that it's valid, but it's illicit.
Well, wait. So how do you consolidate the thought that Orthodox, like say Eastern Orthodox churches have valid, even though they're outside of the Catholic Church?
Yeah. So they have valid sacraments, but they're illicit, right? So
Yeah, but how is that? 'Cause, like, it is like at least to my knowledge, it is church teaching that the sacraments performed outside of the Catholic Church are technically invalid.
No, yeah. So it would depend by denomination, right? So, for example, like Protestants don't have valid sacraments, like at all, right? Because their holy orders aren't valid, right? And also their sacramental formulas aren't valid, right? But the Orthodox, since they don't really have like essential authority, they've maintained their sacramental formulas since about the 350s AD, right? In the Catholic communion. Right? So
basically, even though they're schismatics, they still hold up to the OG text or the OG, they still hold up to the OG. The word is slipping my head. The OG formulas, and that's like they're still valid in that sense.
Yeah, but you don't go to that, right? In case right. So a Catholic is only permitted to receive Orthodox sacraments if you're like on the brink of death, right? So it's only in like really grave necessity where you are allowed to take invalid sacraments. But other than that, it's a mortal sin to receive.
So Sedevacanthus baptism is valid. Does that mean it's not a full-on heresy?
It's not full. I mean, he touched on this point. It's not necessarily full-on heresy. It's just people being schismatics.
Right. So that's right. That actually the distinction with right, but it being right with being illicit. So if it's valid and illicit, that means the sacraments take place and you're allowed to go to them, right? But if sacrament is valid, right, if it's valid and illicit, right, the sacrament does indeed take place, but you are not allowed to partake in it because they're schismatics, right? And it's dangerous for your soul. So it's valid, but it's illicit.
Right, and
which means that you should not go to it.
Just for the man, the myth, legend, the doc himself. What's that? Like going back to the whole that sacraments performed within the Orthodox Church are valid. Can I get a sauce for that?
Yeah.
Like, can I get a sauce for that? I mean, is it only contingent on the argument that since they adhere to the original sacramental formulas that Orthodox churches do perform legitimate sacraments? Is there like an actual like text document, or is it just like?
Oh yeah. So there's kind of documents that even precede Vatican II, right? And I kind of support this, right? I can find some document for you, right? But basically, the Catholic Church has declared that their sacraments are valid. And that's contrary to, for example, like Protestants, right? Who the Catholic Church has declared have invalid sacraments, like altogether.
Since they're straight up heretics, whereas Orthodox are still just like schismatics.
Yeah.
All right.
You're right. I can find the document for you, but just ask me another question.
All right. Actually, shoot. I think we're already almost at like 40 minutes now. All right. Like the last question I've prepared is kind of just what convinced you to take your current stance on Sedevacantism. And I know you talked about how you listen to a bunch of legitimate like canon lawyers and people who actually know what they're talking about. They're just like, yo, the Sedevacantism, it's kind of cringe, bro.
Yeah, here. I have it. I have a from the Code of Canon Law here. Catholic ministers administer the sacraments of penance, Eucharist, and working the sick illicitly to members of the Eastern churches, which do not full communion with the Catholic Church. If they seek such on their own accord, are properly disposed, right? And are properly disposed. It's very important. This is also valid for members of the churches which of the Apostolic See are in the same condition in regard to observances of the Eastern churches, right? And the Catholic Church adds that the Eastern churches that are not in full communion with the Catholic Church celebrate the Eucharist with great love. These churches are although separated from us, yet possess true sacraments above all by apostolic succession, the priesthood, and the Eucharist. whereby they are still joined to us in close intimacy. A certain communion in communicatio in Socrates, right, in sacred things, instead of the Eucharist, giving suitable circumstances and the approval of the church's authority is not merely possible but is encouraged. Right, so there is doctrines for that. But wait, okay, and then with the last one, with your last question,
it was just what kind of stands, and again,
yeah.
And stuff.
So I guess recap. Right. So it was really an interview with John Salza that really influenced me. It was about 80 John Salza. It's a book called True or False Pope. You can find it on YouTube. It's with brother Andre Marie of the Reconquest Network. It's on YouTube under the channel of Sens Fidelium. And you can find out basically they're 2 50-minute interviews, and that really illuminated me and gave me a lot of relief. And then from that, I just kept searching, and over time I found rebuttals to basically every kind of argument there is. And then I just thought, and then I always gave back again. And now I'm living in freedom and enjoy and love of Jesus Christ and in the real Catholic Church, in the real Church of Christ. So,
very nice. And Merc, again, same question to you.
Well, as for me and my beliefs, I'm just Protestant.
Alright, nice one.
We'll work on that, but that's for another discussion.
Yeah, that's right. Just out of curiosity, what kind of a Protestant?
I go to the Church of Christ, not the Mormon one.
Oh, the CRC.
Well, if you just Google
I'm
Church of Christ, there's a Wikipedia article about it.
I know absolutely nothing about this.
So,
until you pointed it out, I was like, wait a minute, aren't those Mormons? And it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was great talking to you guys, and if you need me to talk again, if you need to debunk a certain argument from sedevacantism, you're more than welcome to have me on.
Right. That has, unless there are any last remarks.
Thanks for having me on.
It was a pleasure having you on, Marco. It was a pleasure having you on, the one and only freshman papist. And this has been, this has been episode 4 of the Working Title Podcast. And, have a good fucking day.